right, let's talk about muscle tissue. So we're going to talk about the 3 different types of muscle tissue found in the body, talk about the functions of each of these, and how each type of tissue can enable some sort of movement or motion in the body. All right, so muscle tissue is mainly characterized by its ability to allow movement. These characteristics or properties are that it is excitable, so it can respond to some sort of stimulus, usually an electrical signal from like the nervous system, and that it is contractile, which means that it can shorten and generate some sort of force that pulls something in a particular direction. Muscle tissue can be either voluntary, so it is under conscious control, or involuntary, which means it is not under conscious control, so that involuntary movement is done automatically without us needing to consciously think about it in any way, shape, or form. And we have 3 types of muscle tissue in our body: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle tissue. So this is what each of them look like. These are microscopic images, so these are stained slides of real muscle tissue in the body. Up here on the very top, excuse me, I'm losing my voice slowly. So this top one is an image of skeletal muscle tissue. Our middle one in here is smooth muscle tissue, and then the bottom image C is cardiac muscle tissue. All right, so they look very, very different under a microscope because they all have different functions and slightly different characteristics and structures within each of these. We're going to talk only a little bit about skeletal muscle tissue. In today's video, we have an entire chapter on muscle tissue and muscles that we'll cover after our first exam. But briefly, skeletal muscle tissue, this is going to attach to our skeleton, so it's attaching to our bones. This is the only type of the 3 muscle tissues that is voluntary, so it is under conscious control, and then it is striated, which means that it has some little stripe-looking structures in it. We'll look at that in a moment. So skeletal muscle is going to allow movement or locomotion, so our ability to walk and stuff like that. It gives us our facial expressions, it helps maintain our posture along with the skeletal system, and then any other voluntary movements of the body. So voluntary movements don't necessarily have to be something that you are actively thinking about. But it is going to be something that requires that conscious level of control, so you are aware of those movements. Some of these are going to be reflexes, so it seems like it's maybe an automatic response, but reflexes are a little bit different than something being involuntary. All right? So we'll talk more about that type of stuff later when we get to our actual muscles chapter. Cardiac muscle tissue is found in the walls of the heart and nowhere else in the body. So these are also going to contract, and this is going to be involuntary contraction. So this is part of a different branch of our nervous system. Cardiac muscle tissue is also going to be striated and contains special cells called cardiomyocytes, which are attached together by something called an intercalated disc. And these are special cell junctions that attach the different cells of cardiac muscle together, that allow the electrical signals from the nodes in our heart that are generating the electricity required to make our heart beat. They're helping make sure that those signals can pass through all of the different cells of the muscle in order for the heart to contract in a particular rhythm and pattern, and not contract kind of out of order and stuff like that. So these cells are usually only going to have a single nucleus per cell, and one big characteristic is that they are autorhythmic, so they actually don't require any input from the nervous system to beat. So the heart has its own special bundles of nervous tissue or nervous-like tissue that generate these electrical signals that other muscle tissues do not have. The nervous system can control cardiac muscle tissue, increasing our heart rate when we're running or something like that, or we're really stressed out, and then slowing it back down from that. But for the heart to just beat on its own at rest, it requires no input from our nervous system, which I think is really interesting. We are going to talk more in detail about the heart later on in the semester, closer to our third exam, so about midway through the semester. But that's our quick overview of cardiac muscle tissue. So here's our diagram of what these look like. So cardiac muscle cells are kind of in a Y or X-shaped structure depending on the exact cell, and each branch of that Y or X is going to connect to a neighboring cell through those intercalated discs. We also have desmosomes present and some gap junctions for the movement of ions and stuff like that through these cells, but those intercalated discs are really, really, really important, and they are including these anchor junctions, these desmosomes, and the gap junctions. So this entire kind of squiggly structure here is an intercalated disc, and so that is formed by these different types of junctions that allow that movement of that electrochemical signaling to travel through these different cells really, really effectively. And then last but not least is smooth muscle tissue. So this is another involuntary muscle tissue. This is called smooth muscle tissue because it does not have the striations that skeletal and cardiac muscle does. So it looks very, very smooth. It's found largely in the digestive system, but also in the urinary and reproductive systems, and then in our respiratory system, the airways and arteries, plus the eyes. This is what changes the shape of the iris and our lens, so being able to either dilate or contract our pupils, that's actually done by the iris, which is smooth muscle tissue. The lens is going to sit right behind that. We'll talk more about that when we get to the eyes later on in the semester. And then we also have some smooth muscle tissue in our skin, and this is what causes the hair to stand up. So when you get really cold and you get goosebumps and your hair stands up, or you get kind of creeped out or something, that is controlled by smooth muscle tissue. All right. Went a little too far, thought I had another slide. So smooth muscle tissue is being signaled by the nervous system, unlike the cardiac muscle tissue, but it is going to help the digestive system contract and move through food all the way through the system, from the esophagus, stomach, intestines, all of that kind of stuff is all going to be smooth muscle tissue, and it is going to be able to contract in kind of a rhythmic motion, so it's kind of creating these little pulses, and we'll talk more about that when we do the digestive system later on in the semester. But that wraps up our talk about muscle tissue. In our next video we will talk about nervous system tissue.